Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the place where we are creating a community discussion around things that are mystical, things that are magical, things that are energetic, and everything in between. You are here looking at this corner of the internet between two energy workers, two magical people who facilitate professionally for others to navigate their journeys, to move through their path more smoothly, or if they're like a range of challenging things that are part of being human. So we're not going to pretend like we're making anybody more than that. But while you're here, we're going to take different discussions, different topics, and relate and share tools and wisdoms about what we've learned, what we've gone through personally, or how we've helped our clients through similar situations. And today is we've got two interesting topics. We've been diving into Reddit a little bit and seeing what kinds of questions people are asking about spirituality. This was born because Katrina and I are in hermit mode. And so this is the most peopling we're gonna do. And with that in mind, the two topics we have today, one deals with the question of uh, dealing with toxic people or living with them, depending on the case. And the other has to do with hating yourself. These are, yeah, that face is appropriate, Katrina. I feel like these are both superficial and intricate. Um, the downside of Reddit is no backstory or context. So we usually approach these topics as if the individual were sitting here or if we were asked for our opinion. And we're Virgos. You don't have to ask us for our opinion. So that said, more than we are Virgos, it's worth introducing ourselves, and so we can take that journey right now. And that looks like my name is Dahlia Rose. I am the founder of the Conduit School, and I facilitate healings. I do readings, spiritual counseling, and various forms of guidance while using my gifts of channeling and energy work and facilitation, just being able to flow it through me to support others. I have students, I have clients, and I am working to shift the way that we deal with healing and energy, pretty much one person at a time or one group at a time, depends on what's going on. But I'm not here by myself. And so
Katrina Rasbold, half of CrossroadsOccult.com, where we make and sell handmade magical items for use in spell work. We also do spell work on behalf of other people. I do readings for people. I do spiritual cleansings for people. And I'm also an author and have several books published. You can go to KatrinaRasbold.com to find out everything that I do. And one of the things I do is most weeks I get together and talk with Dahlia about these wonderful topics she finds. And as she said, we're hermiting. It's what we do. And so we're externalizing to find out what people are saying on Reddit, because of course that is the finger on the pulse of the internet. And the thready, hyperactive, methamphetamine induced pulse. So what we want to present is that we're not pretending to have all the answers. We're not pretending that we are the end all and be all. We're not even pretending these conversations haven't happened hundreds or thousands of times elsewhere. This is just our Virgo moment. This is our time that we're sharing with you what we think. It's not always what you would expect. I hope we can be a little bit I don't like being predictable. Do you? I like to come up with a zinger now and then that people might not have thought I would be able to think of. And so that's what
100%.
we do. And I just am so grateful that every week Dahlia puts on her internet hazmat suit and goes wading through the sewers of Reddit to find us these wonderful topics. So yay, I'm excited. And this week is no exception. We have some great topics to go over, and they're might even be related in some ways that we can find.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's a great tie-in. So the first topic is how do you deal with toxic people when you're living with them? I
move out. That's how you deal with them.
yeah. I was gonna say I come across more and more, and I don't know if it's just my generation or the upcoming generations, where there is an extremely low tolerance for toxicity, and so there is a and the general theme on social media is like, nope, if it's not working, bye. Versus older generations I've seen where they're like, oh, well, we didn't throw things away when they were broken. And it's like, okay, I think both sides are valid. But to start things out, I thought it would be worth defining toxicity and within the context of a relationship, because I think that's unique. A toxic person is may or may not be toxic everywhere in their life. Who knows? I mean, nothing stays in its pretty little box, and so there may be some seepage. But in the context of a relationship, with doing some googling, I found an interesting definition. A toxic relationship is one that has unhealthy dynamics and causes you distress or harm because you're unsupported, manipulated, or disrespected. While we all have our moments and seasons of selfishness, a truly toxic person will take and take and take and give you nothing in return. Um, you're right. Interesting definition. It's not what I expected Google to pull forward, but from this particular website, there was also a disclaimer to address the difference between toxicity and abuse. And I feel like that's important here too. And that is to say, if you are in an abusive situation, whether that be mentally, emotionally, or physically, there is no, what's the phrasing that I always hear? Well, at least that's not a thing. If abuse is abuse and should be removed immediately. Versus the context of what we're talking about, where I think some layers of toxicity are approachable, and then others, if you feel like you're being unsupported, manipulated, or disrespected over time, that's a situation to remove yourself from. But that's the easy answer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we're here to dig a little deeper. That Reddit post, by the way, had no other things to say. Like, that was the title. And the blurb, it's literally one sentence. It just says, they're full of negativity and they're so draining. That's the whole post.
So are people who live with toxic people.
Yeah.
There's
And
that old saying that hurt people.
oh yeah.
And it can be really hard to be around someone who lives with a toxic person, not only because it's like a communicable disease where they're conveying that toxicity to other people through them, but also because of the toxic feelings it creates in them. I like the definition of toxicity. I could probably do a whole show just on the definition of toxicity.
Yeah.
I think that you hit on a really interesting point, which is the people are less tolerant to toxicity than they were before. I think part of that is because there is a lot of times when we talk about toxicity, we're talking about partners or spouses, or we're talking about parents. Those are, I think, the worst offenders. And there was in the past, for most of our past forever, a huge stigma against divorce
Right.
and a huge moral stigma against distancing yourself from your parents.
Mm.
And now that that isn't necessarily the case, people are more comfortable, not comfortable, that's a bad word. They're more willing to break those ties and to not endure that toxicity any further. What's interesting to me, I do have a question to get to after this, but that was my first thought when I heard that topic. What's interesting is that there is definitely an uprise, I think, and there's cultural and societal reasons for that too, in toxic children. And
Interesting.
you live with your kids who are very toxic, and it's very easy to say, well, if you have toxic kids who are treating you in a way that you would consider abusive or toxic, and I know that you will do great discussing the differences in abuse and toxicity at length, unpacking that a little bit. But people will say, if you've got kids like that, that's your fault. You
Hmm.
raised to be that way. You are responsible for how your kids turn out. Now, I have 6 kids and they're all adults now. I'm not convinced that's true.
Oh yeah. I
There are
mean, that's
kids,
nature
man,
versus
yeah.
nurture.
There are kids that come out of the womb just little bastards, and they have a predisposition toward
Being a
the
bastard.
worst possible behavior in any situation. And no matter how you try to gear them toward making those good choices, they are going to step in the pile of shit every single time. And that's just reality. And they are going to attract to them people who validate that behavior. And so it's going to continue or fortify that behavior. If you send your kids to public school, that's the little bastards they're going to be surrounded by, or other kids who behave that way, so that they've got a little club of assholes. And so then they're bringing all that assholery home, and you're trying to undo it. And we don't have teachers standing by anymore correcting bad behavior because they're afraid they're going to get sued, or that,
Yeah.
or they're making the very right decision of, I don't get paid enough to manage this level of bullshit. So we do have toxic kids with good parents. And a lot of uppity people, especially, I want to point this out, people who do not have kids will say that it's always the parents' fault, and it just isn't. So that leads me to my question or comment that I would bring up in response if a client brought me that situation, those 2 lines as um, the opening to our session. I would want to know, why are you living with toxic people? What are the circumstances that brought you to be in this toxic situation? Now, I want to look back on past clients I know who would feel like they were living in a toxic situation. One was a dude who was a serial cheater, and his wife was toxic. He could not heal that relationship because she was so toxic to him, because he had screwed around on her multiple times, and she's over it. So she's being toxic. Damn right she's being toxic. And sometimes I'm looking at other ones with people who genuinely did have roommates or partners who were just struggling with some sort of personal issue that causes them to engage the world in a very toxic way. And so that would be what I want to know. Okay, now clearly you're coming to me because you're not just walking out the door. There's some reason why you're there. What is it? I'm a minor. I live with very toxic parents. Okay, let's work on that. Number 2, I'm married and I'm not financially able to live on my own, and I can't leave. I'll lose my house, or I'll lose my kids, or whatever it might be. There's lots of reasons why people are living in toxic environments. One of the real big ones I hear is, my parent is elderly and needs care, I'm being paid to provide home health care to this parent, and this parent abused me for decades.
Mm.
So there's lots of weird reasons why people live with toxic people. But my answer is always, if you in your heart believe this person is toxic, what we're looking for is an exit strategy. We're not looking for reframing. We're looking for eliminating that toxicity in the most absolute way that we can. And if in the process of discussing that exit strategy, that client has revelations that causes them to believe that maybe this is something mendable or fixable, then we can have a different conversation.
Yeah. Um, that's interesting. It feels important to highlight what you were saying about reframing. Reframing is an important tool for situations that truly are beyond your control. And I think it's a common mistake to believe that staying in a relationship, staying connected to family members, and things like that are beyond your control. So if I was running into this person, similar questions initially, and we would start looking at one of my like favorite humans, other than Katrina, in the world, and other than Mason, and Jay, and all my lovely family. Is a teacher of mine who talks about fascial release and things like that within the body, and they always discuss the zone of control, and that feels so important to establish also on an emotional level, because once we establish that, I think we have an opportunity to re-empower the person. Like, there are so many times I've seen people in the throes of overwhelm that it took saying something obvious or hearing something obvious from another person to remind them. I've been there. Like, having magical friends is amazing because they're like, "Oh, did you do Olympia? Did you smudge? Did you?" And it's like, damn it, I have that in my toolbox. So why didn't I use it? And it's hard to see the label from the inside of the glass. And so approaching this individual or having them approach me looks like, where's your zone of control within the circumstance? And working from that point, not trying to, like Katrina said, it's not about reframing, it's not about improving your view of what's happening. It's what can we do, or even or not only what can we do, but what can we do even if your goal is to stay, and then let's check in midway through to make sure that your goal is still to stay. um, and again, this is toxicity versus abuse. This is negative behaviors and negative coping mechanisms and negative projections versus intention of cruelty and violence. So that's where I'd begin. Is where are we starting? Where do you want to go? And then a midway check.
I think that my treatment plan, if you want to call it that, and this would really start in that first session, would be to grow, after you've identified, grow that zone of control, because
Mm-hmm.
people make it very tiny. And people do this because a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction to fall into the victim category and the helpless, learned helplessness space,
Yeah.
where they feel like they just can't do anything about it. There's nothing I can do. This is how it is. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because I can't leave. And it's been amazing to me the number of people that I will actually argue with about whether or not they can leave. And they'll say, "Well, I can't just not go to that family reunion." Well, why not?
Why not? I can't not go to that wedding. Why?
Right.
Why not?
Tell me why you can't. Well, because they'll talk about me like a dog. Guess what? Based on what you're saying to me, they're going to talk about you like you're a dog anyway. Why
Mm-hmm. While
don't you
you're
go
there.
to Disneyland instead? Do something you want to do instead of this. or, I have to live here. There's no other place I can live. Okay, well, let's unpack that a little bit. There's no other box in the entire world you can put your stuff in. You're choosing to stay. Now, your choice for why you're staying might be really excellent. But the fact is, I want to get that client to the place where they understand it is a choice that they're making. And that we can, no matter what the situation is, find options. It might not be options they want. If you have a toxic boss and you're making $100,000 a year, you might choose to stay in that job with that toxic boss so that you don't make $70,000 a year doing something else. But it's still a choice. And when you start to get them to the place that they realize they're making that choice, that gives them a place of power in which to stand. And they start to feel more like they do have control and agency over their own life. And that is your critical turning point in the conversation with that client, is when you get them to get they could make other choices. And we can start listing a whole stenographer's notebook full of other choices they could make. And then we can start lining through the ones that are absolutely off the table. Things, and it can be ludicrous. It can be, you could kill yourself. You could kill them. That would eliminate the situation. It's going to create bigger problems, but you could. And the more choices you give them, the more they see that they have power to do different things. And for every one that they rule out, they'll say, I'm not there yet. I'm not at that place. I'm not that one. Maybe I could do that in a month or two. And so you just start narrowing down, well, what could you do? From the most ludicrous to the most reasonable, trying to edge them into a pathway forward.
I would also add in to give them little choices that they could use to reinforce their level of trust in themselves. Because as you were talking about that, I was recalling situations where execution wasn't the problem. It was a level of trust in their choices. Like, I could give them something reliable and they'd execute. But if it was, if there was no clear outcome, so it could be good or bad in their mind, there was decision paralysis. And
no doubt.
yeah, so along with it strengthening their zone of emotional control or situational control, I would be looking at what can we do to reinforce your ability to trust your choices. And I'd probably play the synchronicity game. You start noticing life, you start noticing how you feel when you make that choice. There's a lot of great tools that support this kind of thing as well. If you aren't able to, book a session with somebody, or if you aren't able to do a lot of work in a little bit of time, you can also go into different, what am I trying to say, like mediums of self-exploration, like astrology. There are astrological placements that tell you kind of how you deal with different things. And so you can use that to make decisions. There's like human design, where it goes into detail about different aspects of your body, where if you feel into it, that means that it's a yes, and you can make a decision, and you can explore those things and use them experimentally and start to feel some assurance from a system until you get your bearings and can start to trust your choices just simply because they are yours. So I wanted to throw that in there. It's astrology, human design. There's the gene keys. There's so many. There's so many things.
Are
Um,
you having a 5-year? If you're having a 5-year, just hold on.
numerology, yeah,
Your
yeah.
5-year, everything's toxic. Just be cool.
Oh my God, yeah. Buckle up, Buttercup.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I see that is not just, we think of this idea with very meek people, but no, I'm talking the strongest, most assertive out there people as well go through this. And that's the need for permission, the need to be told it's okay to not go to this event where toxic people are going to be. And the original poster was talking about living with toxic people, but I'm also just talking about toxic people that are chronically around you and in your life.
Mm.
Some people just need permission to be told it's okay to move out. It's okay to leave. You don't have to stay and take care of these parents who are abusing you. There are other jobs in the world. There are other things that you can do, and you don't owe this to these people. And sometimes they just want somebody to say the words out loud that they have permission to do that. Another thing that I think is the biggest thing that holds people back in these situations is the inability and unwillingness to take a leap of faith.
Mm.
They want assurance that they're going to have the same or better pay if they leave this horrible, toxic, soul wrecking job. They want assurances that they're going to have somebody who loves them more and better if they leave this partner. And man, the universe don't play. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. You have to be willing. It's something my mentor said, gosh, 40 years ago. Are you willing to give up everything for the promise of nothing? And sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you have to find that level of self-love and self-preservation where you're just saying, I don't care what happens next. I'm going to eat my foot off to get out of this trap. It's time to go.
Right.
And I know where the keys are, and I'm leaving. And I don't care what's on the other side. I'll figure that out when I get there. And so many people who claim that they are in these horribly toxic situations are unwilling or unable to actually reach that point where they just say, that's it. Leaving the Amityville Horror House, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And I've been there, and I did.
Same.
And so that makes me a little judgy, I guess, but it's not easy. It's really, really hard. But sometimes that's what you have to do. You just have to kick over the Monopoly board and start a new game.
So, were there things that you did to fortify yourself while you were there? So we know that it feels important to say I that there are times when, yeah, you become fed up and then it's like a slow burn.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are times when the toxicity is raging and it's, you sneak away in the middle of the night or just stop answering the phone or whatever it is that you're going to do. So both can happen. We never know, kind of based on the person or the situation, which direction it's going to
Mm-hmm.
go. So with you, Katrina, in your situation, were there things that you did, the tools that you reached for to fortify you until that point that you broke through?
Now, this happened before I had any type of training in healing and shadow work and this sort of thing. So I was just flying by the seat of my pants. I had a relationship that was at that time maybe 14 years of being married that ended, not by my choice. And I had a rebound relationship that I went into with somebody who was the polar opposite of my first husband. And I knew from the very beginning this was, and it was one of those things of just, we moved in together first because we were friends and both needed a place to stay, and then became romantically involved.
Hmm.
There was any romance to it at all. But I knew from the beginning this was just a terrible idea. I should not be doing this. But I had started that relationship for financial reasons. We both needed a place to stay, and we could have a nicer place to stay if we combined resources. And at that time, I wasn't planning on having a relationship with this person. Anyway, that's the backstory. And so ended up figuring out right away this was a very, very, very bad move. I should not have done this. And I've got my kids with me, and they're still recovering from this recent divorce. And my ex-husband was still being super weird. And it was just this whole mess. And I felt frozen because I couldn't trust myself to make good decisions. Because I had made this terrible decision to move forward with this part of this relationship. I couldn't trust me because clearly I make bad decisions. So why would I trust me? And also because this was a person who was pretty well liked by people. So I had a lot of people that were sympathetic to what was going on, but also were saying, well, maybe you're just having a hard time because of the divorce and it's not even final yet. And already there's this situation. And so maybe it's just a matter of working harder to try to make things work. When I just knew in my heart it was just all bad. Everything about it was just bad. And so it was a matter of just trying to talk myself into staying. There weren't really coping tools. It was just, look, if you just write it out, once you get better and healed over this divorce, everything will work itself out. And meanwhile, this person is just, who was a lot younger than me, was just acting out all over the place, lying all the time, doing directly the opposite of any boundaries that I set. Just acting out like a child on all of these different issues. And I had to sit back objectively and say, I'm not making this shit up. This is really happening. And the toxicity that was growing was unreal. Just hatefulness and resentment that I was trying to set boundaries, which was seen as controlling. And it really was boundaries like, I work all day long every day and you don't. So I need you to help me take care of the house, just things like that. And it was just ugly, ugly, ugly stuff. And there wasn't really anything I could do to nurture myself through it. I was just absolutely seat of my pants trying to hold on by my, by my knuckles, basically just white knuckling it. And then there was a final conflagration that there was no coming back from it. And a friend of mine who was present at the time said, I never saw anybody not live at a house so fast in my life after I threw him out. Not the friend, but the partner. And what happened is that my son, who was about 6, I think at the time, who hated this person for good reason, mouthed off to him in a really horrible way. And the guy from across the room picked up a book and threw it at my kid's face. And my kid's nose just exploded in blood. And I was like, hey, that's it. You're done. Off you go. Boom. And, I just take my car. If it's not back in my driveway by tomorrow, I'm reporting it stolen. Just get GTFO. And, I look back on that situation now and I know that person did not have the tools to cope with what we were going through. And the person has since told me how many times in his life he replayed that moment of watching that book in slow motion just roll toward this kid's face. No, and so, yeah, it was just a horrible thing. So I've spent way too much of our time talking about that. But in answer to your question, I had no coping mechanism. I had no delegate to talk to. I had no sense that I was just the walking wounded that walked into a more toxic situation.
Okay.
There's that.
Well, I suppose in my situation, like looking in the past, different coping mechanisms took the form of maybe what is fairly normal, taking time and space for myself to think. Those moments when I need to make sure that something is real, I need silence. Like I can't be around others, or and I'm willing to take what people will say to me, but in order to digest it, I just need that alone time. And so I can say that getting into a space of solitude, I leaned into my most toxic moments were um, my most toxic experiences. They could have been moments too. I mean, I'm not perfect, but when I think back on like toxic marriage and things like that, I leaned on oracle cards because I didn't trust
Mm-hmm.
myself. So I was like, well, what is this? I'm going to pull a card, and whatever it says, I'm going to, uh, either do it or look for it throughout the day. So, if it's like one of the decks that I really loved was the Enchanted Map by Colette Baron Reed.
Very, yeah.
And I would always get this, like, I think it was called like sweeping out. It was like a cleaning card, like sweep out the crap. And so that looks like looking over the things that I'm not willing to put up with, or even just cleaning my house, or a lot of the things that we've talked about on this show that can help you reframe. Um, and what I found when I'm thinking about this particular relationship was that I found strength in not externalizing my pain, because my pain seemed to feed the animal that was ripping apart our relationship. And so if I was in pain, it was good.
Hmm.
Versus going inward and becoming somewhat stoic about different things, like really leaning into this has nothing to do with me, and all of those sort of phrasings and things like that. And it's such a fine line to dance stoicism and numbness.
Yeah.
So check-ins were important as well. I did not have friends or people that I could really talk to. I had to tell my bosses what was going on
Mm.
so that I could, and they were friends, to be fair, so that if I had to leave work early, or if I came in eyes puffed from crying, they knew why.
Yeah.
But I, um, without magical tools, it looked like going within and just trying to filter out the noise, the feelings, because you really do feel insane. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
and then when I got tools, because I was like, there's got to be something, and I just started looking for myself and being drawn to different things. I would spend 4 hours in a crystal shop. It was a crystal shop in Maryland, and I would just stay there looking around, looking at things, looking for things. And
Mhm.
I was really, really just in a deep search for myself, I think. So, yeah.
There's a scene in the movie The Man with Two Brains, which is a Steve Martin movie, that the setup is that he had a wonderful wife who died, and he meets a very beautiful woman and marries her, and there is a horrible toxic relationship that ensues. And so he goes up to the picture of his wife Rebecca and says, if there's anything wrong with my relationship with Doris, the new wife, or Dolores, the new wife, if I shouldn't marry her, please give me a sign. And the picture starts to spin and the wind starts to blow and there's lightning and you hear this woman going, no, 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 no. And then it stops and he's still just staring at the picture and he goes, just any sign, I'll watch for it. But meanwhile, I'm going to put you in the closet. And he moves the painting. And I found that if I tried to use oracle cards, that was what I did. I was so filtered that I couldn't draw the wisdom from whatever cards were there. If it
Interesting.
didn't say something I wanted it to say, I would
Mm.
just, oh, this is just cardboard, and just push them away. And so that I wish that had been more of a help to me than it was. And at that time, I'd
Sure.
been reading cards for a long time, and it
Wow.
didn't. But again, I didn't have. This is arrogant to say. I didn't have friends as smart as I was about reading cards or about
Mhm.
going within. And so there was nowhere to turn. There was nobody who could guide me through it. There was nobody who could help me get better. And it took a really long time, really, really long time.
That's interesting. I guess for me, when I finally got that reading, like I was a Christian and I was like, oh God, I'm going to the devil. And so I went to the devil and turns out wasn't the devil. But I never got information that I wanted to hear. So I guess I was at that point like, okay, well, if it's if it's not what I need, if it's not what I want to hear, maybe it's what I need. So
Yeah.
I feel like I had been prepped pretty
I want
well.
to I want to address what Heidi's saying. You
Oh yeah.
really do feel insane for what? For perceiving the situation as toxic, for wanting to get out. The answer is yes.
Oh
Both
wow.
of those. You do
Yeah.
feel insane. And unless you have somebody who can give you now, of course, any of your friends you talk to are going to be Team Dahlia, or they're going to have a bias usually for you. But at the same time, it's always good to have somebody who is objective, who can look at the situation. Now, they're not going to have an objective view of it because they have your view and that's it.
Hmm.
So you do feel insane because largely you chose this. You chose to be in this relationship, probably. You chose to continue this relationship, hoping it would be better. It's not. And it doesn't matter if the relationship is with a parent or a sibling or a friend or a boss or whatever. You're still choosing to continue that relationship against all evidence that this is not going anywhere positive. You feel like you gave it every opportunity for it to be something positive. The other person seems locked in toxicity and you're wanting to get out. So the insanity, I would say, when people think about feeling insane, for those of you who have never felt insane, let me work with you a little bit. Okay. It doesn't feel like you're just making bad choices. It feels like you can no longer trust yourself. You can no longer trust anything you're seeing, anything you're interpreting, anything that you're hearing. All of your filters are very, very muddy. And so you can't see or hear anything clearly. And that's what it feels like to me when you're in a toxic relationship. And that's why, like Dahlia was saying, you can't read the label from the inside the jar. You have to have somebody else who can help you move forward out of that situation.
Yeah.
So,
Well said. I mean, and I would say, in contrast, usually the toxic person that you're dealing with, their viewpoint is put forward as fact, and it's not, there's it's not two viewpoints meeting, because I mean, we know human beings do not see things the same way, even from visual evidence on things like 9/11 and other world things. When you go back and you ask people what they remember, it's all different stories, because our brains
yeah.
filter in things. So there's always reasonable doubt, but when opinions start being labeled as facts and you're the person questioning, like, oh, okay, well, is that true? You can start to kind of dissolve in
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And so the other person's toxic opinion begins to expand and you dissolve into it, and you feel like, well, what if I am what they say? Or I can't be
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying because they're the only ones saying it. So what's happening? So it's a literal game
Yeah.
of it's insane.
The other side
Nothing
of
is.
that, the other side of that is that in your life, if you live a reasonably long time, and I'm talking 70, 80, 90 years, there will come a time in your life, there will probably come many times in your life where someone will perceive you as toxic
Oh yeah.
when you yourself do not feel that you're being toxic. So when we're talking about toxic people, we're talking about someone having an impression through their filters that the person they're living with or spending time with is toxic. That's not me or Dahlia saying that person's toxic. That's us saying that you're having an experience, just like you were mentioning 9/11. You're having an experience. That other person is having an experience. And somewhere within that experience, a person or both people are perceiving toxicity.
Exactly. I think with all of that, we are ready to go to the next one.
Yeah.
So I'll just read this for you all, just to get a framework of where their mind was. And so the title is "How Can I Stop Hating Myself?" I I just can't stop hating myself. 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and schizoaffective disorder. I also began receiving disability benefits as these conditions make me unable to work. This condition, coupled with the inability to work, has always felt like an invisible brand, a label that marks me as not good enough. It's given me a negative impression of myself, and it makes me think I don't deserve love or anything good. I have this mindset of needing to earn love, needing to earn good things. I feel like I don't deserve them just because. My self hatred is so intense that I can hear and feel a door slamming shut in my heart in my darkest moments. It's rooted so deeply, I can feel it in my heart, not just my head. I don't believe I'm worthy of love, no matter what my extremely supportive family says. I do work with a therapist, but I don't believe her either when she tells me I'm worthy of love. I don't know what to do. I just can't get off this roller coaster. I want to stop hating myself, but I don't know how. What can I do?
If your therapist cannot help you and your extremely supportive parents cannot help you, we cannot help you. And the reason that I say that is because, number one, this is not what we see so often, especially in our field, which is a person who says that they are autistic because they self-diagnose, because they have not been treated, because they have not had someone who knows autism inside and out have a conversation with them from a professional standpoint. This is somebody who has a diagnosis. They also have a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, which is a horrible disorder that will feed in the exact prompts that this person is just describing. This is hardwired. This is almost impossible to reprogram, especially for those of us who are working from a lay perspective and working without additional pharmaceuticals to shift the wiring of that external processing. And I hate to be the one that's screaming, it ain't gonna happen. I don't like to put ceilings on what we do. But one of the things I learned as a lay healer is there comes a time, and often many times, where we have to say, it would be dangerous for me to proceed with this, given my scope of abilities. It would be dangerous in the sense that I am not qualified to manage this. And for what is being described here, the majority of psychologists that I know are not qualified to manage this. A lot of the psychiatrists I know are not qualified to manage this. This would be a very intense specialty treatment because everything in this person's head is misfiring and keeping them from having the acceptance of even the simplest prompts. So you're going to be talking to a wall, and so are they.
Mhm.
And like I said, I really hate to just shit can the whole thing because what we do is very effective and we are very good at what we do. But I think this is just one of those times that it's just outside of our. I would want this person to be, for lack of a better term, institutionalized, removed from society's influence, and put into a space of concentrated therapy and reprogramming, as well as intense medication tinkering to find the cocktail that causes everything on the console to light up in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, definitely not a straightforward, we'll just go and be with nature kind of conversation. It definitely seems like multiple disciplines would this is a team effort. I always, whenever I run into conversations about schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, I recall a study that was done where a doctor, and this was like a one person, one off. This doctor decided after his anthropological research to ask if one of his clients who suffered from schizophrenia could be allowed to go to a tribe in like Africa, I believe it was, where they were known to have shamans and things like that. And so this therapist recognized the psycho spiritual aspects of what his client was going through, and went and sat with this tribe, and this tribe had their way of navigating that with this person, but it was constant, like Katrina was
Mm-hmm.
saying. And it wasn't just one person, it was multiple people working with this individual, and I believe the stay was for a year. And on the other side of that year of constant support, where these individuals understood from again a psychospiritual perspective what this individual was going through, was unconditional amounts of acceptance and support, which we typically don't have available in the United States. We just don't.
Yeah.
um, this person was able to somewhat resolve their issues. So very, very unique. I didn't I didn't pick this one, like Katrina said, for us to say no, not possible. um,
Sorry. we
in
didn't I didn't say that in pre-show either. I got that as you were reading it. I just heard the door lock and I was like,
um, I do believe that each of us, on a semi-normal neurotypical scale, can get into a place of hatred when we, like I kind of said in our little description, when we start to realize the choices that we've made and how we could have made different choices, and to resent where we are, and to look around and feel a sense of like, I could do better, I could be better. And maybe it doesn't manifest as full hatred, but maybe bitterness, maybe resentment, all of these things. And
Mhm.
so when I look at the title itself and just, how can I stop hating myself? This individual has a long journey ahead of them, because it's not simply just hating themselves.
Mhm.
And, that's probably the only conversation to be had, is it's more than hatred.
Mhm.
And it needs additional support. If it was just self hatred, um, I would be looking to, hmm, that would take, so one, that's more than one session, but two, looking for things that they love externally, or things that they enjoy externally, and drawing comparisons to inward states of being.
Mhm.
So, the strength that you see in that tree, where else have you seen that kind of strength before
Mhm.
in your experiences? Things like that. Um,
Mhm.
and trying to pull in sort of a journey of connectivity for that piece of hatred, to see that um, hatred is an intense fixation on a handful of circumstances.
Mhm.
And if we can kind of expand the lens on it to see what's really there, something's calling forward to be looked at in a deeper way, um, we may have a chance. We may have, and may have a chance. There's also in the realm
Mhm.
of how do I stop hating myself on a neurotypical spectrum where that's not anything anybody outside of the person can actually do anything to support.
Very true.
So,
What I would also say is that people will automatically assume that the cure for that, or what our ambition would be if you are suffering from self-hatred, would be to get you to a place of self-loving. And that's not the turnaround. It's to get first to a neutrality. And that's what we can achieve through that identification of positive attributes in the things that they love, and how does that relate to them. Just getting to a place where you don't have the hatred, you're just neutral. And here's our challenge with that. And this is why, I said what I said before about the immersive experience that's needed for this, is that when we're dealing with someone who is processing things with an autistic brain, and they're also having the chatter and the input of the schizoaffective disorder go on, clearly not in a positive way. I mean, most people who have schizoaffective disorder don't have voices that are telling them to go pick flowers and do nice things, or that they're really good people. Those things aren't the way that it's working. And so what happens is we get them to this place where we're almost seeing the city of neutrality, in our distance. It's coming up. We're starting to feel like we're making progress, but then we put them back out there in the world, and it
mm,
all gets undone. It's like putting a little girl in her pretty white Easter dress with her little curls and hat, and then sending her out to play, and she jumps in a mud puddle every single time.
yep,
So unless it's immersive, we have to remove the external stimulation that's creating that negative feedback, because the person already has negative feedback going on in their head. External clues through observational bias are only going to confirm reasons why they should hate themselves. So we've got to separate them out from that confirmation and flood them with cognitive dissonance
yep,
about what they're actually thinking and experiencing. And I believe that can only happen in an immersive, controlled environment, because, man, the second we send them back out there, we turn into that idea of you can't cure a problem with the same mind that created the problem. We're sending them right back into whatever supported that behavior or that process, that condition to start with. And that undoes so much of what we do, that we're just clinging to any hope of anything good that happens.
yeah. And hopefully, part of that, much like our first person, is not who they live with. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, guys, that is what we have for today. So, if you find yourself in similar situations and you are living in a toxic, negative environment, the first thing that you can do is start asking questions about where your zone of control is, or where your power may be, even if it is in just picking up the phone to talk to somebody to confirm that it is or is not toxic. That is a powerful step. Um, and the next piece is, if you are in a space of hating yourself, I love what Katrina had to say about neutrality. Shamanism really, really pushes home neutrality, from viewing things from a neutral standpoint. There are plenty of 0 point and neutral meditations out there as well. So there's opportunities to kind of pull back from everything. And when the person talked about the door closing on their heart, maybe that's not a terrible thing. And sort of normalizing the conversation about needing to just unplug. So if you guys are having these interactions, if you had them in your life and you have insight about what got you through, drop those in the comments, and we'll catch them afterward if you're catching this on the replay. But for now, we will put this show back in the fridge and see you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everybody.
Bye.